I wish I had some makeup or something today. I look like balls.
You look fine. You're good. Don't
I'll
worry.
just go like this time.
Do that.
So this was the hat that I ordered this off of someone from Etsy. And after I ordered it, she messaged me and was talking about how she was suddenly the cool mom because her daughter was a fan of the YouTube channel. And she was making a hat for
that
us.
is nice.
Yeah.
I'd wear a
That's
hat,
actually real
but Cameron's hats. Cameron has a very small skull, so his hats do not fit.
Relatable.
Anyone, you have a small skull?
Yeah, I've got a small head.
I never noticed.
Oh yeah, we are
Small
streaming. Cough.
Oh.
cough. Warning.
We are?
Warning. Warning.
Whoops.
Oh man, good job, Daniel. Way to go. Way to be.
What timing? If anyone's watching this right now. Sorry, Joe Hernandez isn't here yet. But
Well, it just says test. So.
it says voice of. No, it doesn't. I just hoping it says voice of Daruk, Joe Hernandez interview in Hylian Games.
That's what it was supposed. That is what it was supposed to say. Yes.
But I thought you said it was supposed to say test.
Can you change it?
Yeah, it does say lie. Okay. No, it's good. So I think what
You
happened.
guys have any exciting questions for Joe?
Do you have any mundane
Joe-
questions for Joe?
Is Daruk short for something?
Darukalele.
Daruk.
That's it.
I don't know
That's
who
the
this
one.
is, but this person has the best username on Instagram because every time I see it, he makes me hungry. But his name is Garlic Bread, like garlic bread with an O. I'm just like, yeah.
Garlic.
I'm watching this while at work, so I'll be in and out during discussions. Yeah, cool. We happen to be at work as well.
I was gonna say we
Technically.
are at work.
Yeah. We are just waiting.
I guess I should actually swap all of my things, get everything open. I like to have the YouTube thing going at the
things.
same time, so that way I know what kind of bananas are going on in the chat. Yeah, I'm watching you
Bananas.
guys.
Bananas.
Yeah. Oh.
I'm watching the code bananas.
Yeah, I posted a thing on the Discord that was like, okay guys.
Asking for admins,
Yeah,
yeah.
Mr. Admins. Don't let a troll come in and ruin this for everybody.
You're a test.
Rude.
That's all you got.
Yeah. I couldn't think of a better comeback.
Okay, I hate this. Get that. There we go. There we go.
Okay, there he is. And we can add to... How do we add him?
Oh my god. There's a
Add.
button at the
There
bottom.
is a
It's like the plus button. When you
Oh,
add
yeah?
it. Add
Is,
people
is,
to the
that, is that how you do it?
Cat.
Yeah.
I see a cat.
You see,
Oh, is there a cat? Oh, hey.
Behind you.
Aww. Must be in the
Meow.
presence of Joe. Oh, hey, that's Joe. He's connected now.
Hello, Mr. Joe.
How are you guys doing?
hey!
Good. How about you, Joe?
Super.
Good. Can you guys hear me correctly? Is everything coming out good?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
you're
can
good.
hear
Yeah,
you.
everything sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you going to
I'm-
use webcam or...
I'm not really like what I don't know if I'm ready for screen time right now.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
A-okay.
Yes, I look so awful right now.
Alright. Well,
No, that's totally fine.
yeah. Oh, look.
We're just honored to even have
the
you here
cat's
right
attacking.
now. So.
No. Sorry, if you had seen me yesterday, like I was all really nice and presentable, like really well done. I just got back from the mall, and I look and I feel gross.
Oh
Nice.
no, were you just in LA for the convention there?
I was out over in Salt Lake City
Oh, okay.
convention, Salt Lake Gaming Con.
Yeah.
And they brought out most of us, just about all of us, and so it was the first time that we had all been together since the game came out.
Oh, that's awesome. Aw.
Yeah. So right now I'm out here in LA and it is gross. It's like 100 degrees, and it is disgusting.
Yeah, I saw that LA was going through some sort of gross heat wave right now. I'm really glad that we missed that when we went down to E3.
Oh, you guys were out there for E3?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went down for E3. Thankfully, it was like 90 degrees.
Uh-huh.
It was still too hot. I'm Canadian, so it was still way too hot, but it was still a hell of a good time.
Okay.
All right, yeah. So we are already live streaming. I'm going to go ahead and click record for the edited version of the podcast. But is everybody ready to begin? I can go ahead and do the intro, introduce everyone, and we can get started. Yeah. All right. You good,
do it.
Joe?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right. What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or Game Over Jesse, as all of you may know me. Here with us, as always, is Daniel.
Hello, everybody. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Kayla.
I timed that.
And joining us for the first time is Joe, who I'm going to go ahead and let introduce himself for those who may not know who he is.
Hi there, guys. I am Joe Hernandez. I am probably most well known for playing the role of Daruk and Yonobo in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Nice. All right, so for episode 41 of the Hylian Gamescast, you're going to be joining us for a brief interview and then a quick Q&A. We have some fan questions that we picked out, that some funny, some serious, so hopefully we'll be able to get through a couple of them. But I guess the best way to start this out is with probably one of the questions you likely get asked the most.
Okay.
And that is, how did you first get this job, this role of Daruk in Breath of the Wild? How did it first come about for you?
Oh gosh, this was, if I had to guess, I'd say back in March of 2016. And there was this audition that was floating around. And mind you, for a big AAA title like this, and most high-profile type games, they don't name the franchise of what you're auditioning for. They like to keep everything in secret so that, spoilers and other important information doesn't get out. So it had this very vague and generic code word and everything. And, it was going out, and they wanted English, British, kind of standard American kind of, actors that could pull off that dialect convincingly. So I was like, okay, well, that's kind of within my wheelhouse. So I did it. And what was really unique about this particular audition is that most auditions that you get nowadays for us voice actors, I would say 90-95% of them you record from home. And so this was one of those 5%ers where they're no, we want you to come down to the studio and record, and they'll have the casting director there and to work with you. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I really didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, that's cool. And you do it, and I read for a couple of different roles, and again, the names weren't what they are now, and that was very intentional. And they everything was very vague. You had one character that was a rogue character. You had a character that was a princess. You had a character that was a warrior. You had a character that, was kind of a barbarian. And so it was very vague. And so in my head, because at one point we had signed a non-disclosure agreement, and it was very, very, you see Nintendo up there at the top. And so again, you're searching for whatever information that you can kind of go off of. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, kind of Lord of the Rings-esque, British dialect. Are they going? Is this maybe a new Fire Emblem game? I don't know. And so in the script, I'm looking, and there is no mention whatsoever of Hyrule, no mention of Zelda, no mention of Ganon, Link, none of that. It was void of all that stuff. And I later found out that that was done intentionally because they don't want people to know what it is that they're auditioning for. And so I auditioned for a couple of characters, but the one that I think that they ended up really liking was for this one character named Hannibal, and he would go on to become Daruk. And they don't give you any pictures. Sometimes they'll give you like an image or a screenshot or like a rough sketch, and that'll help kind of form what you think the voice would be for a character like this. Again, no image, nothing to really go off of. And so you go in with what your interpretation of this character might be, and you have the luxury of having the casting director right there. So you're kind of bouncing ideas off of one another. And obviously, like, he kind of knows more. He's more in on the secret than what he's letting on. So, you just kind of refine it, and you're kind of bouncing ideas off one another. And that's sort of where it came from, and in my head, the direction that I was given was like Gimli from Lord of the Rings, a very big, bolsterous, larger than life character. So the picture that I had in my head was just this, just badass warrior with this giant axe and, again, just very bombastic kind of a personality. And then you do it and they call you back and you don't hear anything. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe I didn't get it. And then probably about 3 months later, I heard back from them and they said, yeah, you got the job. And again, no idea what was going on. They kept it very secretive, very close to the chest. And even like the timetable from when we first auditioned to when we actually started recording, like I said, was like several months, which is a little unusual because usually, like, if you audition for something and you end up getting cast, you'll probably end up recording it within about a week or two or so. That's usually the timetable that these things run. Little did I know that we were getting approval from all the corporate heads up at Nintendo, and everybody kind of had to put in their 2 cents and sign off on, what they thought the voices should be and everything. And so, that's why things took as long as they did, which is totally fine. And I would say we probably started recording like day one, I would say probably like August or maybe September of 2016. And the very first day I went in, the casting director, Jamie Mortellaro, comes up to me and says, "It's Zelda." And your jaw drops and you can't really comprehend what it is that's going on. I had heard whispers because, you hear things, like Game Informer and, little blogs on the internet that a new Zelda game was in development. But again, up until this point, we've never had voice acting in any of the Zelda games. So why would you think that, you would be a part of this franchise? Like I had said before, I thought Fire Emblem. That's the route I thought we were going. So it really threw me for a loop in the best way possible. And you kind of feel like, man, did I win you kind of feel like you won the lotto a little bit. I grew up playing the franchise. I mean, Link to the Past and, Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker and Spirit Tracks and, all those games I grew up playing as a kid. So to be able to, just be a part of this franchise is it's mind blowing. I can't comprehend it. Sorry, I hope that answered your question. I kind of
No, that was an amazing answer.
Yeah,
that was great.
Watching the live stream chat here, and people are talking about how just amazing your story is.
And there were days where we would record, and I would just go back to my car, and it was like, what just happened? So, and the voice that I had with Daruk on day one was not the voice that he ended up with, in the finished product, because again, like most projects like this, you're constantly refining it, you're constantly perfecting it, and really, like, I didn't feel until the end of recording that I really got the character, that I really understood it, that I understood his cadence and and everything. And for those of you that were able to be at the panel yesterday out in Salt Lake, or if anybody recorded it on YouTube, Bill Rogers was talking about his role as King Hyrule, where, you know, we just took so much time, you know, getting all those little nuances in his speech and his character. And, you know, you want to make sure he's strong, but he's not mean, that he's, you know, gentle, he's fatherly, but then he's not, you know, cruel or anything like that. So, you know, it's just this constant, just streamlining and, like I said, refinement of this character. And that's a testament to Jamie as a director, and also to Nintendo for allowing us the time to explore these characters, to make them what they are. Because sometimes with video games, you know, especially when you're recording in the studio, time is money. So it's like, we just got to crank this out as quickly as possible. And so, you know, sometimes depending on the project or the company, there isn't as much care for voice acting as there probably should be, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned that, you know, they came in and said it's Zelda, told you that it was Zelda. So some people are aware of the CDI Zelda games, but other than that and the animated series, The Legend of Zelda is known for being like basically text only on all of its cutscenes, on any dialogue. And the fan base, I feel, especially before Breath of the Wild, was very polarized, and half the fan base love the idea, or would love the idea, of voice acting in Zelda, where the other half absolutely hates it because it goes against tradition and what they know Zelda as. And if it comes out voice acting ends up being terrible, then it might ruin that game for them, even though they could just, you know, mute or change the language to something else and read the text, because it's not like they're going to be taking the text out. But that's just my little gripe with that.
No,
but
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Nintendo, I think, is very aware of what everything you just said. And if you look at most of their, you know, like first-party games, they're very careful and very protective about, you know, their characters and the dialogue and their voices and all that. Part of it is, I think, because they wanted to have a little bit more universal appeal. I've heard like voiceover casting directors, especially the video games, say, you know, we want it to have as much of a broad appeal to as many different countries as possible. So, you know, to have a very Western kind of dialogue about it, you know, might limit its appeal. And then, you know, of course, there's localization and so on and so forth. And so you'll have, you know, for whichever, you know, country or market or whatever, they'll do a specialized dialogue for it, so on and so forth. But the reason why I tell you this is because, you know, at the convention that I was at yesterday, we had, you know, Chris Judge, God of War. We had, you know, Victoria Atkin from, you know, Assassin's Creed and Horizon Zero Dawn. And you look at those types of video games and you look at most of the big franchises and what they're going at, it's all very cinematic right now. You know, these are games that are being done with the same level of depth and dialogue as that of a big budget Hollywood film. And so Nintendo, I think, is sort of testing the waters, or at least they were with Breath of the Wild, where I don't think they wanted to necessarily dive into that pool just yet, but this was them just sort of dipping their toes and seeing how people reacted to it. And I would say for the most part, the reaction and the reception has been very positive.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on the first half of the question, but the second half was going to be, with it being, with the fan base being so polar opposite on should it have voice acting, should it not have voice acting, that's, I imagine, a lot more stressful for the voice actor as opposed to a brand new game that's coming out or a game that's always had voice acting. So coming in and being one of the main characters in a series that's over 30 years old, what was that like for you? Like, was it stressful thinking, what if the fan base doesn't like this? What if the voice acting's good, but then there's still the people who don't like the idea of voice acting? So what was that like for you, like getting in the headspace, not just of your character Daruk, but in terms of the fan base as a whole?
I tried to think of it not necessarily in terms of what would the fan base think. I try to think of it in terms of what would me, Joe, as a fan of this franchise think. And that's usually like what I go in with leading into like a project like this, because like I said, I'm just as much of a fan of this franchise as everybody else is. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm probably my own harshest critic when it comes to something like this. So, there were times where it's like, you know what, we got to redo this again. You constantly want to make sure that you are putting out the best effort. And Nintendo and Jamie Mortellaro, like I said, the director, I wouldn't say that we were getting a lot of pressure from them. I mean, obviously they want to put their best foot forward and put the best product out there as possible. But I feel like, I've talked with Sean Chiplock about this. I feel like the pressure that was put on us was probably put on us mostly by ourselves, because we understand the gravity of what is going on. And so, like I said, we just want to deliver. We want to make sure that it's the best version of itself that it can be.
Kayla, Daniel, do either of you have a question that you would like to ask? We'll kind of rotate between questions.
I'll let Daniel go first.
Real quick, to kind of build on what you said. And again, I was reminded about it yesterday just because I saw Jamie. You have to trust. You have to have trust in your director. For a big project like this, it's a collaborative effort. You kind of have to give him as much credit to my performance and to Elizabeth's performance and Patricia's, everybody else's. He deserves so much credit, in addition to what everybody, sees our names and all that. And so, a great director can get a lot of nuances out of a performance. And that's exactly what he did. And, there are times where, like I said, you're feeling the pressure and you're second guessing yourself, but right there across from you in the booth is, a seasoned pro, a guy that's directed, countless games, Kane & Lynch, Just Cause, he directed Horizon Zero Dawn. He's been there and he's done that. And so with that pedigree of his resume and his background, you have to trust and know that, what he's doing is right. And so, it's a team effort. It really is.
Yeah, no, it's someone who I've done a bit in theater, not as much voice acting, but you make me kind of want to bring him on too, because the director almost often feels like the unsung hero with performances like that. And they do so much pulling out of an actor, which unrelated to my question, but just some thoughts that I had when you mentioned that. As far as the next question goes, I read in an interview with, I think it was Mr. Fubuyashi, or one of the other leader developers or directors of the game, that they had made quite a bit of story changes as far as during development goes, over the course of the years they were developing it, right? So when it came to your recording, I know Patricia mentions, it was spread out through quite a span of time. Was it like the first time you went in, you recorded a bit or the memories, or did you have to go through like several different spread out like over months apart performances, like to actually go in and record those bits? And then, were there parts they recorded, and if you're allowed to answer this, of course, it's okay if you're not, but were there parts where you went and recorded and then they just didn't even make it in the game at all, or you ended up having to go and redo because they just kept changing those scenes too much, or anything like that? Or if you're willing to share.
Well, okay, I'll say this. The game, I think, was already at that point animated and voiced in Japanese. And so if you guys are familiar with like anime and dubbing and all that, the lip flaps were already animated with respects to the cutscenes. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that they didn't necessarily tell me day one of recording. Had I known that, I probably would have worked on my dubbing skills a little bit more. And so, like I said, it's kind of a process, and it's kind of a, you have an idea as far as like the syllables and the timing and the lip flaps and the movement and all that and the cadence and what's going on with the translation and all that stuff. And once you get into the booth, sometimes those things can change. And so it's not necessarily something that's entirely set in stone. Things can kind of change a little bit, just depending on the circumstances and all that. And, I don't think there was anything left out. I really don't. And you do it, and you have so many different versions of a single line, or so many versions of a single take, and so on and so forth. And so, there's probably a whole lot of stuff, probably lying around. But I want to say that we used everything. I don't think there's not going to be like a deleted scene or anything like that, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, that was kind of, I guess, the more correct term as far as that goes. Now, we talked a lot about Daruk, especially your audition for him. Yunobo as a character is someone I find really interesting because he's supposed to be Daruk's descendant, but he's so wildly different of a character. So when you went to audition, you mentioned you auditioned for several characters. Was Yunobo one of those characters as well? If they had that in the works at the time, or was that something that kind of came after and they're like, oh, by the way, can you also do this guy too?
He absolutely was. He was in the sides, and they were looking for a character that was very young, kind of like, 17, 18, 19, kind of young, kind of nervous, kind of geeky, nerdy, kind of in that vein. And so, I tapped into what my interpretation of those sides were. Again, no clue, no idea that this would end up being a Goron. Had I known that, had I had that image in my head already, it may have altered what I had done in my approach. Actually, now that I think back on it, because it does work both ways. Because you go in with your sort of preconceived notions, and you think Goron, big, burly, kind of, heavy, larger than life, very deep voices, and so, if you have that picture in your mind already. You certainly wouldn't come at it with a sense of that kind of young, kind of, pipsqueaky, kind of cracking, pinched voice that I ended up doing with Yunobo. So again, I was flying blind, so to speak, but you trust in what your director is doing with you, and you run with it. You don't question it. That's part of the thing about this field in voice acting is, you have to be fearless. You just have to go with it, and you shouldn't give it a second thought. Just go with whatever your gut instinct is. And I think it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of people forget about him a bit. I think he's not a character that's as well discussed as Daruk is, but I have a soft spot for Yunobo because he almost feels like he has trouble sort of filling the shoes of Daruk, which is amusing in its own way because he's a big and vulnerable character himself.
Yeah.
It's funny because you mentioned how I was just thinking how they didn't show you any pictures or images of the characters beforehand or at the auditions. And I was thinking about that, and it makes sense if they were being so secretive, because if you saw this image and you're like, as a Zelda fan especially, you'd know instantly, oh, that's a Goron, and you'd know
yeah.
right away like what you're working on and what you're dealing with.
Or if I saw one. So yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that's it makes sense. Kayla, did you have any questions?
Actually, totally not Zelda related, because I was going through your website earlier and just kind of like seeing what other stuff you were doing. What exactly do you do with Disneyland Resorts? Because I see that you've been helping them out for like 10 years now. That's crazy.
It's been longer. I've been doing character voices over at the park over at Disneyland now for 13, 14 years now. There's a little show called Turtle Talk with Crush.
Yep.
And you talk with Crush the sea turtle from Finding Nemo. And I've been doing that. And even when I first started, I was doing the voice of Stitch over at Innoventions over in Tomorrowland. They had like a little picture phone where you can go in and talk with him. And this is like pre-Skype, so it was like really, really cool. And,
wow.
You're in like a little booth and you're talking to Stitch, and he's like, on a beach, and he's, scratching his butt and he's picking his nose and he says hi and all that. And you can have like, a 5-10 minute conversation with him. It was very cool, very intimate. And, it's been an awesome thing to do. I love what I do. One of the other things that a lot of people don't know is that we have a sort of a wireless remote setup for Turtle Talk with Crush, where we're able to do shows remotely for the Children's Hospital of Orange County twice a day.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool.
Awesome. So all the kids that are there at the Children's Hospital that aren't able to come to Disneyland, and they do all sorts of really cool things for them, trying to, make them laugh and entertain them and, do things for the parents while they're there. This is just one of those things that is a great service to kind of take their minds off of what might be happening in their lives. So I don't feel like that gets enough attention, and it probably should.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've never heard that before, so it's nice knowing that. All right, Jesse, do you have another question loaded?
Yeah, I'm trying to time these right. That way we don't go over with Joe.
I know. I'm kind of like taking a look to see when we started, when we can ask fan questions.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a lot of momentum going, so let's just keep,
All right. So, I guess about 2 weeks ago, it was the week after we got back from E3, we had Patricia on, and she mentioned some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier, about how whenever she was doing the recording, she had to match the words and the emotion and everything with the lip flaps, because everything was already recorded in the other languages, and all of the different localization teams were having to get everything to match. So what was the biggest challenge with you trying to not just technically, get the words out to match perfectly with the video, but also doing that while getting the emotion that you need to come across as well? Because Daruk has a lot of, I would say he's one of, for me at least, he's one of the more comedic characters. So what was that experience like with you? And did you personally, I think this actually goes into one of the questions that one of the fans was asking later for the mailbag, but were you able to relate emotionally with your character as well? Whenever you looked at Daruk and his story throughout Breath of the Wild, was that something that you connected with, or was it something that you had to actually do a bit more acting with? Because sometimes, if someone's like playing a character that's the exact opposite of them, then they have to, I don't want to say try a bit harder, but there's, like a rift between them and their characters. So for you, getting the emotion and everything with your character and the technical aspect of matching it up, how was that for you? And was the way that you viewed the character the way that it was written on the paper, if that makes sense?
It is an extreme juggling match, because voice acting in its own is just by itself is very, very difficult. Just like you said, trying to get the emotion and the timing, and you're in this little booth and you want to make, you want to honor the character and honor the text and honor the scenario and the circumstances of what's going on and the magnitude of such an epic story such as this. And you're acting opposite somebody that isn't there. And so you kind of have to fill in some of those gaps at times. And so that in of its own is just, demanding, and you want to get it right. So now when you add in the need to successfully dub and get the lip flaps, that's a really, really hard thing to do. It's so, I like I said, I wish I had known that it was gonna be a dub, so to speak, day one going in, because I probably would have brushed up on my my dubbing skills. I've done some anime before in the past. I've been on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Alone on the Sea. I'm trying to think of other shows that I've done. If you guys, again, I don't know if this is necessarily the crowd, but if you guys are anime fans, you're anime fans. I'm on. You can hear me on season 2 of Berserk, which just came out, I think in the past month or so.
Joe, you need to stop.
blowing
I'm
Kayla's
fangirling
mind.
so hard right now. Who did you voice in JoJo's?
Like they told me, like, you know, hey, it's really gory, it's really graphic, like, you know, it's not for the kids. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, no, that's fine. I could totally do that. Like, yeah, whatever. And I go in, and like in the first like literal like 10 seconds, there's like a guy getting like split in half, and it's just, you know, everything is just so, you know, gory and out there on display, and it's all in slow-mo. So like I said, that is definitely one that is not for the kids. So yeah. Sorry, I kind of lost track a little bit.
No, it's fine. People that are familiar with our podcast, we tend to get off topic a lot, but that's what all of the fans that they like. They might tune in for the topics that we're supposed to be discussing, but they stay to listen to all of the nonsense that we get into. And with you, most of our questions are going to be Zelda related, but this is really nice for the people that are watching that may just know you as Daruk. So it'll help them if they're a fan of Daruk, then maybe they can go and check out some of these other things that you're in. Yeah. So this is
it kind of
really
came
good.
back, you know, as far as like what were some of the challenges as far as tapping into a character like Daruk versus Yunobo and all that. And I kind of gave it some thought, especially, you know, everything's still kind of coming back to me. It's semi-fresh in my mind, having had like sort of a mini cast reunion this past weekend. But I gave it some thought, and I realized that Yunobo is sort of kind of who I was maybe back in high school, that sort of nerdy, awkward, unsure of himself type of a character. You know, probably a very exaggerated version, because I'm not entirely 100% like him, but I think when it comes to voicing any role, you want to tap into whatever qualities you can that you personally identify and that you personally bring to the table with this character. And I would say that there are some definitely for Yunobo and definitely some for Daruk as well. Me being a new father, there is definitely a loving and dad-like quality to Daruk. You know, and he's, you know, for as big and tough of his, you know, exterior and how mighty he is and, you know, all that, there's still like just this warm, lovable side to him. And again, you know, you just want to tap into what you can and bring the parts of your personality with the character. And sometimes, you know, it's real easy, you know, when it's very well written, it comes like second nature.
I don't mean to skip Daniel and Kayla here, but while I have it in my head so I don't forget it, I have one serious question and then sort of a joking question that kind of just popped in my head, which was, so when you find out that you're playing Daruk and you're also playing the other character Yunobo? So
Yunobo.
Yeah, Yunobo. I have a hard time pronouncing it. So when you're playing Daruk and then, like, you know, you get all excited about playing this Goron champion who is sort of taking on the role as sages would have in previous games where they're helping you know, going around saving the sages or saving the champion. So you get this character and you maybe fall in love with who it is and everything, and then you find out that he's dead and he's been dead for 100 years. What was that kind of like for you? And I think of that as kind of joking because in my head I'm imagining, like, you get the script, you start learning about the character, you're like, oh, this is really awesome, and then you turn the page and you're like, oh, he's dead. So, I don't know. Like, what was that like for you? Did that change the way that you viewed the character at all? That you were... Most of the scenes with the champions do take place in the past memory. So, did that change anything for you?
A little bit. I mean, you know, even though he's quote-unquote dead, Daruk is still very much alive. He's still a very lively character. And so, like, you know, that doesn't really change all that much. I would say, you know, just from what I remember with respects to the writing and the way it was written, he apologizes to Link. He's kind of sad. You know, he's like, you know, I'm sorry I passed. You know, I wish I could have done a better job. And you know, I'm there's a little bit of guilt, I guess, and he feels somewhat responsible for Calamity Ganon existing, these 100 years later. So there's a little bit of sadness, but through it all, he's still the same character. So, you have to deal with the seriousness of it all. When things are serious, you got to be serious, and when things are, there's those little moments for the lighthearted, fun.
I guess going back to you, Daniel, this time.
Oh, great. Okay, so obviously when everything was said and done, the game was completed, it was released, huge, great reception. Then later down the line for the DLC, did they have to call you back in for that, or was that sort of done ahead of time and then just worked into the DLC after? Because there's like additional scenes that if they hadn't planned on, you would have had to go back and re-record, right? So
I completely got you. There are some games where, yes, they will record the DLC sort of ahead of time, knowing that, it's going to be coming like a month or 2 months afterwards. This wasn't the case. They had already announced DLC that was coming. I think even at launch, they had like the season pass. But it was never a guaranteed thing. And, when we recorded, they had never said, hey, this is the plan. That was never at all discussed with any of us. So I felt very lucky and very honored to be coming back and revisiting this character. And that being said, even when the Champions Ballad was announced, they didn't call us immediately. They had announced it, but, and so you're happy, you're excited, but there was a little bit of time where, my phone wasn't ringing. And so you just, you kind of go, and then, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the timetable of when we recorded everything. I want to say it was like the summer of 2017, and it was released like that December.
Released the night that they had the Game Awards.
I was
right.
at the Video Game Awards with Patricia and Elizabeth, and that was a complete shock to all three of us. Because again, you do it, and sometimes they tell you when it's coming out, and other times they don't. And we're like, okay, that's fine, that's cool. We know it's coming out eventually, but that was a complete shock, like I said, even to us, the cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, was that a challenge, you think? Like, after all of that time where, you had already finished recording, the game had been out, and then they announced DLC. So there's quite a bit of time between those recording sessions. So was it kind of a challenge getting back into the character, or did you find it easy to kind of just slide back into the swing of things after all that time had passed?
It was like riding a bike. Like I said, I didn't feel like I really got the character down until we finished, kind of like our last few sessions. And what Jamie talks about is, that's kind of a constant thing with the exploration of a character like this on a project like this. And what he'll do very, for most of his games is, okay, now you understand the character. We're going to go back to the first scenes that we worked on day one and go back and kind of redo them, because the character grows, the character, it changes from what you begin recording with what you finished. And so, like I said, it wasn't until the very end where I felt like I got it. And coming back and revisiting all these months later, I still had it in me, and I still felt it, and I still, there are times where I was recording and I could hear Jamie's voice in the back of my head, and I knew it. We both carved out something that was great, and we had it set.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, Kayla.
I guess my last question that I have would be, how was it for you, like, finding out that you were working with Nintendo and being able to work with them? Because as Jesse mentioned, like, we're both brand ambassadors, so I'm on the field, like, I go out and I demo video games, and I get to go to the Nintendo of Canada, like, head office all the time. And me, that's like my childhood dream has come true, and that's all I ever want in life. So I can't imagine, like, you, like, voice acting for a game for Nintendo. So, like, how did you kind of, like, how was working with Nintendo for you?
It was really cool. Like, they had brought down, like, some of their producers and some of their writers, like I said, when we were working on recording. And so, you get a sense of who they are and what they're shooting for. And, just being a gamer myself all these years growing up, you have a pretty good sense of what their brand is, what their target audience is, what they do and what they don't do. Again, at that con that I was at this past weekend, I saw Charles Martinet, who is the voice of Super Mario. And that was a very surreal experience. And he is every bit as genuine of a human being and just a sweet person as you would think that Mario would be, or the voice of Mario should be. Mm-hmm. And we had a little bit of time to chat. And he told me, in his career, he has stopped doing games that are violent or that have a lot of sex or, a lot of graphic stuff, just because he doesn't want it to kind of interfere with the perception or the image that he brings to his character of Mario. And to me, I admire the heck out of him for having that integrity and holding up, the strong integrity of this character for this company. So I'm just happy to try and, again, just keep it going as much as I possibly can and do right by this franchise and do right by Nintendo.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for answering that question, by the way, because you also answered my second question, which is about, I saw that you actually met the voice actor for Mario, like on your Twitter, so I was going to ask about that, and then you answered it anyway, so.
Again, I'm coming back from a convention, so it's all very fresh in my mind,
Nice. All right. I guess my final question for the interview, and then we can move over to some of the fan questions is, and I'm going to try to ask this to everyone because I love hearing everyone's own individual thoughts on this. When we had Patricia on, I asked her. When we have some of the other champions on throughout the next month or so, I hope to ask them as well. But with Breath of the Wild ended with the DLC, so you got brought back to voice Daruk in the DLC. So if Nintendo were to call you again to ask you to be on a new Zelda game, would you prefer it to be a Breath of the Wild 2? So in a similar way to what Majora's Mask was to Ocarina of Time, or Phantom Hourglass to The Wind Waker, to where it is a direct sequel? Or would you prefer working on a brand new Zelda game with different iterations of Link and Zelda, maybe voice a completely new Goron, or maybe an entirely new character, Zora, Rito, Hylian, the King, whoever it may be? What would you prefer? Because in one situation you get to revisit one of the most well-known characters from Breath of the Wild who you got to connect with, but in another situation you get to do something brand new. So where do you lie on that? What would you prefer?
That's a really, really good question. And I think you can make an argument for a really good case for either one of them. If I had to say, I'd probably lean a little bit more towards revisiting the Daruk character. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of fans of the game, and they said, we want to be able to play as Daruk. We want to be able to play as Yunobo, or as
that's me.
But I think there's still something. They definitely want more of it. So, if there was a way to do that. But that being said, man, come on. I'll do anything. Please. Absolutely. I would love to come back and revisit this franchise, whether it's as Daruk or Yunobo or as something entirely different. I mean, I'm lucky to be in the same playground as everybody else. So yeah. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
It's kind of like a 50-50 kind of a question. So I hope that's not an entire cop-out, but Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's just say that it was they did ask you to come back. Like, hey, we loved your performance in Breath of the Wild. We're working on this next game. What character or type of character would you like to play? Would you like to do another Goron in the next Zelda game, or would you like to experiment with maybe a Zora or a Hylian, or I guess another way to ask this, if we can add a little bit more to this, is if you could voice any of the Gorons from the past Zelda games. So, like, there was Darmani from Majora's Mask, who you get to sort of play as when Link puts on the mask. There's the Sage from Ocarina of Time, whose name's escaping me right now, and I kind of feel bad for it. And then there's all of the important Gorons from, like, Twilight Princess. There's the one that's, like, the archaeologist, I believe, from Skyward Sword. So, out of the past characters, who's a Goron that you would like to play, and what is a new type of race that you would like to play in a new game? And I think that ends it for me, unless Daniel has his own question. So, I hope that's all right.
Again, kind of being a little nostalgic, I'd like to maybe, revisit Ocarina of Time and maybe play that Oracle. It's so weird. I remember being like 13 years old and playing on my N64 and going, and I can still remember the music and going and visiting there. And I was so drawn to the Gorons, and I had no clue whatsoever. Not in my wildest dreams could I have ever imagined, that little 13-year-old boy playing Ocarina of Time would be voicing a Goron all these years later. And believe me, it's insane. I cannot comprehend it even to this day.
Yeah. In the chat, they're correcting me. It was Darunia was his name.
Oh, okay. Wow, you guys are on the ball. But yeah, that would be very cool. Just for my own nostalgia.
That ends it for me. Daniel, do you have any final questions before we move on to the Zelda mailbag?
No other questions spring to mind. I'm just excited this is happening right now. So.
I know, me too. I have no idea.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So if you have maybe 10 more minutes or so, Joe, we can move on to the mailbag. These are all questions from the fans.
Are there a lot of people listening right now, watching right now?
There's 39 people watching right now, and I'm not sure how many there are on Twitch. There's probably around half that on Twitch, so not too many people. But
thank you for everybody that's listening right now, that's doing it live. I know we had a slight shift in the time, so thank you everybody for sort of rolling with the punches.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to do a new intro for the Zelda mailbag, because when we upload these on YouTube, the interview will be its own segment, and then the mailbag will be its own segment, is typically how we do the podcast.
Before that, quick thought, I was actually just scrolling through the Zelda mailbag, and I feel like Joe has already answered a lot of these questions.
Really?
So it might be really short.
Some of them,
all right. Yeah.
If you guys have other questions, or if anybody on the Twitch stream or anything like that, if you just, come on, just throw it at me.
Yeah, everybody that's watching live, just put up your question. Be sure to tag myself or Kayla or Daniel so we can be sure to see it. And then after we get through these questions that he hasn't already answered, we'll pick those. But we're going to get started with the mailbag. So everyone's ready, I imagine?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or Game Over Jesse, as all of you may know me. And joining us on the Hylian Gamescast's Zelda mailbag, where we answer your Zelda questions, is Daniel and Kayla, as always. But we also have Joe, who everybody may know as Daruk in Breath of the Wild. We just had a very nice interview with him where he answered all of our questions. But now he's going to be answering some of your questions. So my favorite question here is... Sexy McIntyre is his nickname in the Discord. We call him Sexy McIntyre because of his voice. He does some voice acting as well, and he just has one of those really deep, lovely
smooth,
voices,
buttery voices.
So
Can I just say something real quick? I mean, since you're talking about deep, sexy voices,
yeah.
You know, I was in Salt Lake City this past weekend, and Chris Judge, the voice of Kratos from God of War, was there. And we both rode in, like, you know, a shuttle together. Mm-hmm. And he just hearing his voice, like, first of all, I'm in a shuttle with Kratos. Like, we're riding, in like a little SUV going to the convention. So that there's that right there. And then just hearing his voice, it's like, oh my goodness, come on. Like, it's not even fair.
Yeah. So I guess
just his everyday speech, like, you know, it's like, you know, can I get an iced tea? Or you know, just something trivial like, oh, does anybody have a stick of gum? Or, you know.
Oh my gosh! Wait, did you fangirl at all because he's Teal'c? I would have just flipped right out. From Stargate SG-1, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways.
No, so
it's funny you say that because I'm listening to you and I keep thinking, man, this guy's got such a good voice. Like, even not just your normal voice, you could be on radio and all. And it's, I guess, one of those things, you know, you're always looking up or something.
Yeah. So Kayla kind of touched on something that I was saying, and you kind of did as well, mentioning like being around, you know, the voice of Kratos. So I guess this should have been for the interview, but before we get to Sexy McIntyre's question, what was it like for you going from someone who was a huge fan of the Zelda series and looking forward to Breath of the Wild, and then all of a sudden you're on the other side of that to where fans of the series are now fangirling over you and getting excited to talk to you, when before you were the one who may have like been excited to meet whoever it was. Like if you would have met Patricia, the voice of Zelda, like now you're on that side. Yeah. So what was that like for you?
It's like I said, it's surreal, man. It doesn't compute. It's still, you know, the game has been out now for about a year and a half, and it just still gets me every time. You know, I've played this game. I played, you know, and my friends that have, you know, played, you know, with me, that, you know, we just grew up, you know, on the SNES and the Game Boys and the N64s and all that, and it's like, dude, you know, you're in Zelda, you know, they're you know, it's surreal. And what's even more crazier, I think, is like my parents, who, you know, they're old fashioned and stuff like that. And not that they discouraged me from playing video games, but it's, you know, they definitely wanted me to make time for homework and sports and, you know, all that stuff that they want kids to do nowadays. But, you know, they wanted me to be like a lawyer or a policeman, you know, a cop or something like that. Like, you know, a voice actor, that's crazy. You know, and not just a voice actor, but to go on and be able to say that you've done stuff like this, it's, you know, if it were all to end tomorrow, if it just, you know, if it all comes to a screeching halt, I'd be okay with it. I'd be, you know what, I would feel content. And that's a really special feeling. I'd hate for it to end, but you know, lending my voice to a franchise like this, it's like, come on, it's not going to get any better than that.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be surreal. Even, like, Daniel, Kayla, and I, we haven't done anything nearly as great as, you know, voicing a Zelda game, but even just with the YouTube channel that we have and the podcast, like going to E3 for the first time and being like, oh, we're in LA, we're all together, we're like, we have some fans of our own, and like meeting all of the people who had been listening to it. Like there were some people that went out to LA to hang out with us while we were there, and it was crazy seeing them, because the way that I looked at it is like, I'm just a fan of Zelda like everyone else. It's just we are talking about it, but that's enough to make people become fans of our channel. And then with you, like, it's completely on another level to where like now you are in the Zelda games. You're not just playing them.
One of the major questions that we get, the people will ask me either in person or on Twitter at a convention or something like that is, how do you get into voice acting and so on and so forth. And so you have to have that foundation, obviously, that performance and that acting background. But I think right behind it, you have to love it. You have to love what you do. It shows in your work. It shows when you go that extra mile and you dig deeper when you maybe doubt yourself or you're not 100% certain. And so that's really important, is to have that love and that passion. You shouldn't be doing it for the money. You shouldn't be doing it for, whatever type of fame that you think you might end up achieving. But you do it because you love doing it. And from there, if you work hard, the rewards will be there, and that stuff will come. And that's kind of my little ditty. And I'm also a big believer in it doesn't matter if you want to be a voice actor, if you want to be a plumber or a lumberjack or, whatever. Surround yourself with people that are like-minded like you, that will encourage and challenge you and make you the best version of yourself, that make you want to pursue your dreams and be a happy and healthy version of yourself. I used to have a girlfriend, an ex-girlfriend of mine, back when I was in college. She would often kind of like, she would ask, well, why do you do those voices? What's with the voices? That's so weird. And, she's very judgmental and all that. And I really kind of let it get me down. I was like, oh gosh. And so it kind of pulled me out of, kind of experimenting and testing my range, because that's a lot of voice acting, is just kind of goofing off. You're playing around, you're testing, you're just creating characters. You're doing what would probably get you in trouble back in grade school. But I think that's the type of thing that makes for a great voice actor. And so you just want to make sure that you have people that will nurture that passion for whatever it is that you have.
Really great advice. Ilya.
Yeah, I really like that. That's
really great.
Yeah.
Real talk, man. I just got real talk from Daruk.
Yeah. Ilya, who is another one of our podcast co-hosts, whenever someone can't make it on, or if we need a fourth person, we'll invite her. She actually just graduated recently to do theater and voice acting and everything. So she was on when we interviewed Patricia, and a lot of her questions were directly about advice and experience and stuff like that for voice acting. And she's in the chat right now, and she got excited and was like, yes, I just got some free advice, thank you. So a huge thank you from Ilya, which I also, there's links in the Skype chat that I just sent. One is for the YouTube live stream, so if you want to watch live to see everyone else's response, I don't know if you have it open already or not, Joe, but it's there. And then the other one is it's a Google Doc for the questions that we're about to ask you. So if you see any of those that you would specifically like to answer, then you can just scroll to the bottom of that Google Doc. But getting to our first question from
finally,
from Sexy McIntyre. Yeah, he asks, how many rocks do you think Daruk eats in a day?
12.
What?
They're big ones.
12 big rocks.
I mean, how big are we talking? Like 12
a dozen
boulders
rocks.
or 12 like pebbles? I mean.
No, we're talking full-on boulders.
Full-on boulders.
Yeah, not all at once, but I would say you kind of spread it out.
Throughout the day. Yeah.
A well-balanced breakfast, lunch, and dinner. 12.
So do you think he unhinges? He just tries to swallow it all, or does he smash them up and eat them? Or
Oh no, I mean, you wouldn't eat like a chicken wing all at once. Like you just kind of you start and nibble and you work around the bones, and the next thing you know, you've had a chicken wing. Or same thing with an apple. Like you don't swallow it whole, of course.
No, I mean he'd choose, but
Yeah.
We're getting a rock stew.
Yeah. All right. So, were you able to open up the Google Doc?
I
Joe?
think I saw some of them, but I can't. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time right now.
All right.
Yeah,
No,
that's okay. Don't worry about it.
We'll just read them out to you. So Kayla, do you want to take the second question here to ask?
All right. So I'm gonna grab a question again from Ilya. Well, you already gave her free advice, but she is curious about, like, because she's done some limited voice acting radio shows, and she was wondering what your warm-up routine is for your voice.
So, I don't know if every theater program is like this. At other colleges, I can only speak to what I've gone through and my experience. Oddly enough, I've compared notes with Amelia Gotham, who is the voice of Mifa, and we've both kind of had a very similar theater training background, which is pretty nice because it's like, oh, you did this, I did that, and so it's great where you're able to actually like compare notes. But you do some stretches, some like vocal stretches to create some additional breath and support in your lower diaphragm, so that you're able to be clear and enunciate and make sure that your instrument is running properly. It's like yoga, Pilates, and I think the specific like instructor or person that pioneered it was like, it's called Fitzmaurice work or Fitzmaurice. And conveniently enough, Amelia happened to study like the same technique as well. But it's weird. It's just a bunch of like kind of yoga, kind of Pilates type stretches, but you spend like 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning and you do it, and it helps just make sure that your voice is able to sustain whatever kind of punishment that with the screaming and the shouting and all that stuff, as much as possible for whatever a session or 2 sessions or however long things might run. So that's vocally how you kind of prepare, I guess, or at least I would anyway.
Very cool.
All right. Yeah, Ilya, hope that was able
Start
to
doing yoga and
answer your question.
Pilates.
get on it, Ilya.
Rich is really weird because if you look at me, if you were to meet me in real life, you would say that guy does not do yoga. There's no way in hell that guy is a Pilates guy. And I'm not really like a Pilates or yoga guy, like even to this day, but I do know the stretches and I do know the techniques, so that for the sake of breath work, I'm able to do it. But I'm not like a yoga guy,
Yeah, fair enough. So this next question comes from username Beast Boy.
Not Axel the Beast.
Not Axel the Beast. Different
No?
different beast. They ask, what was it like playing both Daruk and Yunobo? Was it weird playing such wildly different characters yet related characters, one referencing the other all the time? And do you have a favorite between the two, either as in general or just playing them? And I think I want to just add on to that question real quick. There is in the game one particular scene where the two see each other. Was that scene especially weird? Especially to not only to voice but to play when you're playing through the game later?
Weird? No. I mean, maybe a little bit weird for like a half a second. But again, you record everybody. We would record all of Daruk's lines all at once, and then we would have like maybe another session where it was like all of Yunobo's lines all at once. And so, it's not like I was like, talking to myself and that's like, I wasn't have like a back and forth conversation right then and there with my characters. But, it was definitely a moment where you have these two characters see each other, and that was, it just, it warms your heart. You get the feels, it's definitely a moment that you kind of have to cherish. I mean, voicing these two characters, it was fun. It was awesome. And if they let me voice everybody, I would voice everybody. I gave it a go.
I'd love to hear you voice Mifa.
I tried yesterday in front of Elizabeth.
Oh, really?
Her job is safe. I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Amelia. I'm sorry. I tried voicing Urbosa yesterday, and Elizabeth's job is safe. For those guys that are on Twitter, I posted a little video about Patricia. She was doing some of Daruk's lines this weekend, and trying to get her to do some of it and seeing how she would be as a Goron, and that was a lot of fun. We were kind of each delivering each other's lines.
Oh, that's awesome! I'm gonna go take a look for that. Did everyone just die at the same time?
Yes, we all.
I guess it's back to my turn to ask the question. Yes. I was used to earlier during the interview when it went Daniel to Kayla. All right, so my next question comes from, let's see here, Tebby Bear, who says, so my question for Daruk is okay, so there's a typo. It says was. His question is, was voice acting your first considered line of work? Is his question. Sorry. There's a bit of a typo there, so it was... No. Was voice acting your first?
No. I mean, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to, as a 5-year-old and says, I want to be a voice actor. Maybe they do. I don't know. I can tell you that it was sort of just like a gradual... just sort of like weird, organic, just thing that just sort of happened. And I can tell you that as a child, I was exposed to a lot of cartoons growing up. And so that sort of became my foundation for creating characters and having that imagination and being fearless and being able to go there, and it sort of fed my love for performance. And so that's what kind of made me want to go into theater. And theater, as far as I'm concerned, is sort of like the backbone, the foundation for any good actor. I feel like if you can act on stage, you can do stuff on camera, TV, movies, and even voice acting. I think you still have to kind of learn the craft and the technique and the etiquette and all that stuff. But I feel like if you have that foundation, it lends itself very well to other mediums that kind of go in there. I think that's where you kind of start. What was the question again? I'm sorry, kind of trailing off a little.
He asked, was it your... I think he wants to know if voice acting wasn't your first career path.
What was your dream job?
Yeah. Yeah, basically.
I think, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that, I always wanted to perform. I always wanted to be an actor. That was always a passion of mine. That was very counter to what my parents wanted for me. They wanted me to be a lawyer or, like I said, a policeman or something stable, very 9-to-5 kind of a job. And that just wasn't me. That just wasn't where my heart was. And so, like I said, went to college, studied theater, did that. And after I graduated, I was like, what am I doing? Like, where do I want to go? Because unfortunately, unless you're on Broadway or on a national tour, making a living as a theater stage actor is really, really hard, I found out. So I'd been doing the character voices at Disney for a couple years at that point. And so that was sort of my gateway, so to speak, into voice acting, playing these goofy characters that were larger than life. And it just gave me a lot of practice with improv and, pitching my voice up or down and all that. And so it's like, maybe I could do this for a living. Maybe if I got serious about it, I could give it a go. And I realize, like I look at my mug and my homely appearance and my goofy exterior, and I'm like, yeah, you probably wouldn't want to see this on a big screen or on your television or anything like that. So it's probably best if I'm like in a booth behind the microphone doing that stuff. Like I didn't feel like film or television was right for me. And just there's something that's so free and liberating about being a voice actor, because again, I hate to hark on it, but if I were to go and try and make it as an on-camera actor, I can only play what you see of me. I can only play that 30-year-old, goofy, nerdy, kind of, fool, that just kind of, blithering fool. That's what you would see of me. As a voice actor, it's limitless. You can do anything. And to me, that appeals to my imagination. That appeals to my range as an actor, or what I feel anyway. You get to do something different every day, and I love it. It's so awesome. So that's sort of just the natural, organic progression of just how things turned into what it is. And as a voice actor, I do a little bit of everything. I do commercials, I do audiobooks, you do corporate narration and all that stuff. And by and large, a majority of stuff, if you talk to most working voice actors, a lot of stuff isn't fun. A lot of stuff is boring. It's very, like I said, books on tape, or you're updating, the company's policy on sexual harassment for, 2019. And it's very, this is the corporate structure, and you're just kind of reading things out loud. But then every once in a while, you get to do something really cool, like a Zelda. And it just makes it all worthwhile. Like I said, you feel like you've hit the jackpot. And it's the coolest feeling in the world, man.
I love that. Yeah, I was gonna say, I love that you're so passionate about it, because some people, I guess, like if you were doing a voiceover for a video game series that you just didn't like, but it was paying well, so you decided to do it anyways. There are people that do that, so I'm glad that with you were actually passionate about not just the franchise as a whole, but the characters that you got to play. So it's like a win-win for not just the fans to get a great voiceover, but for you as well to play on a series. So Daniel, I believe it's your turn, and then Kayla, I guess, can wrap us up with the final question.
Sure. If there is one question mark, but okay.
All right. Well, this one comes from Just X, and they ask, how many different variations of voices did you play around with to find the right voice for Daruk? Or did you only, well, this one I think you kind of answered in part already talking about it, but I guess we can elaborate a bit more about the different variations, voices that you played around with before, like, finding the one, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, it didn't start out that way. It didn't start out from the first audition. It didn't start out what you saw in the video game. And again, the image that I had in my mind was this, barbarian guy, and Jamie, the director, specifically gave me the direction that he was this Gimli, Lord of the Rings, kind of big, larger than life. And even to this day, I still remember him. My first approach was a very grounded, realistic, sort of a cinematic approach, because that's what Jamie does. If you look at all the games that he's directed, they're very real world. They're very cinematic. And so it was, very serious and very, gruff and very, gritty and all that. And he's like, no, let's make him bigger. And so, again, it was just a collaboration. And it's a constant, like I said, refinement of just getting it to be where it was at. And we would just bounce ideas off of one another, and you go with the text. And like I said, they scrubbed the script. So there was no mention whatsoever of Hyrule or Zelda or Link or anything like that. So again, not a clue. But I remember one of the audition lines was like, oh, could you believe this view? And I think it's that moment where Daruk is up on his divine beast, and he's kind of admiring the landscape of everything. And, just working that, and just, no, really, you need to make this grand proclamation of just, how beautiful everything is, and you're taking everything in. So again, if you have a great director, they will fan that flame of your performance and really bring it out. Voice acting and most things that are performance based, it's sort of like a sports team where you have your athletes, you have your coach, so to speak, or you could even make the argument that it's more like kind of like a symphony where you have the writers, you have, like your cello players, you have your violinists, you have everybody, and we all just kind of come together to be in sync and harmonize with what the conductor, or in this case, a director, is trying to go for. So it's a complete collaboration and it's a complete team effort.
Right on. Well, Kayla,
Yeah.
take us away.
Yeah.
All right.
Answers your
So,
question.
our last question comes from Buddy Kong. He is the only one that has been putting questions in our live chat.
Right.
He asks, any embarrassing kind of like voice acting roles you've had to do, or
Oh man, embarrassing. Oh, well, if it was really embarrassing, should I really talk about it?
Yes.
well, you don't even have to tell us exactly what you were voicing. Like, you could kind of describe maybe the type of character they were, maybe
Okay,
something that seemed a little bit out of your zone that you were trying to do.
Name names, so I'll say this. But a long time ago, I went to do voiceover for a specific, shall we say, marine life theme park that is located in Southern California and also Texas, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And they had taken a lot of heat publicly, a lot of bad PR for the way that they had treated, or shall I say, mistreated some of their marine life mammals. Now, when I got the job, they never said who it was for. They never said what it was or anything like that. They said it was like an educational kind of a show. And I was like, okay, that's fine. It'll be kind of a kid's thing. I was totally cool with that. And I get in, and the director says, yeah, we're just trying to do away with all the bad publicity that Blackfish has gotten us. And the next thing, I'm reading the script, and everything is about like how kind we are to the whales and how nice we are and how well we treat the animals. And it's like, oh gosh,
No.
It weighed on my conscience and my moral being. And so I have a couple of friends of mine that are fellow voice actors that know that I've done that, and they tease me about it. They give me grief, and thank goodness that now, since then, that park has done away with all of their shows, and that show doesn't exist, and they're
it's less embarrassing now.
But for a while there, it was like I myself got bait and switched. Because I think had they had outwardly said, hey, we're this, company, we're this park, I don't think anybody would have signed up.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right. Actually, if you have 2 more seconds, I have a final question that I thought of, sparked by this question about the most embarrassing. So I would like to know, what is the funnest or the most exciting, the best fan interaction that you've had that's come from your roles in Breath of the Wild? Whether it was at a convention or maybe an email or a message someone sent you saying how they really love the character, or someone coming up to you in person, like giving you fan art or something like that. What was the most memorable or exciting fan interaction that you've had at a convention thanks to Breath of the Wild?
That's a really, really good question. There's a couple that come to mind. There's one that kind of sticks out in my head that, right now. There was this woman that reached out to all of us in the cast probably about 6 or 7 months ago. She's from London, England. And she was a mom. And I guess I think it was her son, who was probably like maybe 15, 16 years old. I guess he came down with some sort of like a disease, and I don't remember. I don't remember the specifics of what it was, but it was really bad stuff. And he was going through a really rough time, just physically, mentally, emotionally, and all that. And she had said it's his birthday coming up pretty soon. If there's any way that you guys can do any sort of like special shout out or anything, just whatever you can to make his birthday extra special, it would mean a lot. And so we all kind of collectively sent like a little care package to his mother to surprise him on his birthday. Some of us threw in like signed autographs and headshots, and I had come across some like little stickers and some Daruk stickers, and there were like some buttons and things like that I'd come across on Etsy that I was like, you know what, I'm throwing this in, man, whatever I can do. And we got a lovely reception, and the mother wrote us back, and she was like, oh my gosh, was in tears and loved it, and just stuff like that. Like, that's meaningful. Like, it's great to be able to, like, be in a game and to be able to do something really cool, and that's something that people like and enjoy and love. But to be able to turn around someone's day that is going through, a physical ailment like that is huge, man. That's big right there. So that to me is that was so rewarding. Just it makes you feel really good inside.
Actually, a perfect answer.
Yeah.
The question
Seriously.
popped in my head because I was trying to think of, instead of leaving off on something embarrassing, leave off on something positive, and that would be the best thing. So once again, thank you for joining on the podcast. Very nice of you to come on. Very unexpected as well. When I originally reached out to everyone, because we had started having a lot of the same guests on, and then Kayla mentioned getting new guests, and I was like, well, who could we possibly get in touch with that would even be interested? And then we ended up reaching out to Patricia and you and some of the other people, and everyone who's replied has ended up saying, like, if they couldn't within the next couple of weeks, then eventually whenever their schedule frees up. So it's almost like a dream come true to not just have you and Patricia, but to have all of the champions, and hopefully we can get I can't think of his name right now, but the voice actor for King Rome and some of the other people to come on as well.
Bill's a great guy. He's one of my great friends out here in LA. I've known him for a couple of years, and just kind of a quick little tidbit. I've known him for a couple of years now that he's been out in LA, and like I said, I see him all the time. We're really good buds. When you go on for a project such as this, you have to sign the NDA. You can't tell a soul. You have to hide it from everybody. And so for the longest time, I didn't know he was in this game. He didn't know I was in this game. And up until about maybe 3 days before the game came out, they started, like, Jamie sent out this thread to all of us, an email and like a little blurb to everybody in the cast, like, hey guys, love your work. We're getting ready. This is it. It's happening. It's coming out. And I happened to see his name on the email chain, and it's like, wait a second. How are you doing? So, again, that speaks to the NDA, the seriousness, and that speaks to his professionalism as far as, keeping it a secret and holding true to it. So he has another story about the NDA and keeping it a secret, and I'll let him tell you that when you guys have him on. But Bill is one of my favorite people, so you'll love him.
All right. Once again, thank you for coming on. And for everyone who might be interested in finding out more stuff from you, where could they follow you on? I know you have Twitter, but Instagram, Facebook Twitter, page, do you have?
My Facebook is mainly for, like, family, but I would say Twitter, always a good way to go, at Joe Hernandez VO. Same thing with my Instagram, although I'm not really on Instagram all that much. So Twitter's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
All right. Well, thank you once again. And do you have anything final to say to the people that are watching or that will be watching?
Thank you so much for coming out and listening and supporting and keeping it going and just sharing all the love, man. Like I said, just did a convention right now this past weekend, and everybody was great. So just keep it going. Thank you so much, guys, for supporting it and making this franchise what it is.
All right. With that,
awesome. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us, man. It's I'm super psyched about all of this.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, with that, I guess bye, Joe. We're going to continue on the podcast. Not really good with buys or ending stuff like this, but
Yeah, how do we politely kick you out?
I'll kick myself out, okay? Bye.
all right, bye,
All right,
Joe.
have a good day, Joe. Oh man.
Amazing.
Yeah, how do we
Amazing.
politely kick you out?
Good, smooth, Kayla.
All right. So everybody else that's watching, we're going to finish up the podcast with some news from the past week or so. As soon as there it is, I had to wait for it to go full screen again. All right. So if you're watching and you only tuned in for Joe, I guess you can tune out now. But it would be really great if everyone would stay and watch the rest of the podcast, because we're gonna be.
We're interesting too.
Yeah. So I guess I gotta change this. Viewing. He was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was good. It's very, like I said, I felt like I just got life coached by Daruk. I feel good.
Yeah.
Can't believe that he voiced for JoJo's and for Berserk. Like, that just blew my mind.
Oh yeah.
I don't watch English versions of things. I only watch them in Japanese. So
Yeah.
wow.
Well, anyone who's watched this podcast long enough
Oh,
knows
would
how
you
big a fan I
guys
am of Daruk. So.
want to switch this over to Discord? Maybe.
Yeah.
Do you have
sure.
Discord set that way? Like it's not all the way it is right now. Would that be okay?
Yeah,
Is that an
okay.
issue for you, Kayla?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
No
Let's
Because
do
like,
it. Let's rumble.
all right, because the audio
Bye.
quality will be better as well.
Oh yeah, that's true. Okay.
And we-
Yes.
Y'all just interrupting me.
Am
Just cut me right off. Just cut me
Sucks to
right
suck,
off.
Daniel.
Mid sentence, just call ends. Oh.
I'm on a rude streak. Look at me go.
Just the